Hello, good evening, and welcome back. Elite Girls Boarding School Rodin decolonizes its history syllabus to challenge white Western narrative. And we all know what this actually means. When they're talking about decolonizing the history syllabus, it's to essentially say white people bad, British people worse, and the darker your skin, the better you are. They just draw delineations based on skin tone in order to delineate between who is good and who is bad. So, as I say, white is evil, black is angelic. So Rodin School near Brighton will introduce an updated syllabus to students. That's in East Sussex, south coast of England. Those aged 11 to 14 will now learn about Black Tudors and Sarah Forbes Bonnetta. That was Queen Victoria's goddaughter. They will also be taught about China's Song dynasty and the Brighton slave trade. We were, of course, taught about the slave trade before this. Were we taught about how Britain ended it? No, of course we weren't. Okay. Were we taught about how it is still practiced in Islamic countries? No, we're not. Are we taught about how it is still used in the form of organ harvesting in China? No, we're not. And this is just trying to increase that gap of knowledge in order to, essentially, when children have finished in their state mandated education, and another reason for homeschooling, that they're left with the impression that Britain is, and always has been, an evil place that is far inferior to all these other countries that, for whatever reason, don't seem to have been nearly as successful as this tiny rock in the Atlantic Ocean. And surely for any critical thinker, that's really going to make them question exactly how that's possible. How can it be that such an incompetent, evil country has done so well? That surely we must have done at least something right, and how can these Enlightenment values come out of coffee drinkers in the United Kingdom if we are so evil? How come other parts of the world still hold these values to their core, which are barbaric and objectively inferior in terms of thinking that maths is the work of the devil and that humans are just the property of other humans, and castrating slaves as they do in the Middle East, which is why there was not a big black population over there, whereas there is in the West. As of course pointed out to say, slavery could not have been genocide because there were so many damn blacks, to use the quote. But although, obviously Starkey didn't go down too well for that, it is a fair point that obviously it wasn't genocide. We're not trying to say it was good, of course not. So does that mean then that the British students, the students in British schools, there we go, will be taught about the slave trade happening from the Vikings when they came into England and worked down as far as the Earl of Wessex, but seemed to meet their match in the Earl of Wessex and not be able to go any further south, and that more slaves, it seems, were taken then from England and Ireland, and the UK, basically the British Isles, except for southern England, that would rival the North Atlantic slave trade, based on the proportions of how many British people were taken slaves by the Vikings. Would they be taught about that? No, of course not, because that's then suggesting that Britons have also been victims of slavery, and that isn't accepted. Would they be taught about indentured servitude, where British people were taken to America as it was starting up and be kept for 7 years as property, and at the end of those 7 years they would be set free, except of course slave masters, knowing that their indentured servants would be free after 7 years, would work them to death, and they would have a higher mortality rate than black slaves. Will they be taught about that? No, they won't. Okay, will they be told that it wasn't Britain going to Africa, raping its way through and stealing people that brought about the slave trade, but instead it was slavery existing in Africa as it has done for millennia, as it has across the world for millennia, but I mean you could look at the pyramids for that as well, in Egypt, in Africa, that it was instead English people buying slaves from black slave owners in Africa. Will they be taught about that? No. No, of course they won't. So, again, the whole idea about decolonizing. Oh, okay, then if you want to talk about colonies, will they be taught about the fact that countries like India and parts of Africa became successful only after Britain developed a strong presence in those countries and modernized it and brought it into the Victorian era, with train lines in particular? Will they be taught about that? No, of course they won't be. So, of course, it comes down to, well, what exactly will they be taught about? Well, what they'll be taught about is world history, and so that the history they learn about is as diverse as the students in terms of ethnicity. So it is not a thing anymore of, I like that country, or that society, or that way of doing things. I'm going to participate in that and try to assimilate and be at one with them because they're doing very well and I want to share in those benefits, and I can only do so if I'm also contributing to that community. No, instead of that, it's they're doing well, how much can I take from them and give nothing back and then complain when they're not recognizing me? And I think that mentality is really not an acceptable thought. If you wish to move to somewhere better than where you were born, and you have the opportunity to, by all means go ahead. But surely you would be wanting to know what made them so successful, and participate in that to share in the successes with them who have given you those opportunities, and also with yourself because you've earned it. But of course that is not the mentality here from the vocal minority. Instead it is to say, well, that these people are from different backgrounds, therefore we've got to pick out different aspects of British history that also has people from different countries. And you think, well, why? And they say, well, it's because it's always been the case that we've had forms of immigration of foreign people coming to this little island, so we need to mention that more so that these newcomers don't feel ostracized and left out, that they're different. So, okay, cool. Why don't these newcomers make extra effort in order to try and assimilate? So, because that would be colonizing. Right. So, as a country, being proud of your country's heritage and trying to continue that forward in what has made you a global player, despite being a tiny country, and a champion for human rights globally, that being proud of that and trying to keep a hold of that, while people from other countries try to move in and push their own agenda. Trying to retain your own sovereignty is colonizing, whereas instead, being a country that is receiving these foreign invaders, I mean, perhaps that's a bit of a strong word, but these foreign ideologies, that is receiving them and being changed because of foreign influence, isn't colonizing? Surely that's exactly what colonizing is it not? That you have another country moving citizens into one country, pushing its own agenda. Isn't that the whole concern with colonization in the first place? So, by what they're doing is trying to colonize Britain? I mean, if that's their point, then at least be honest with it. To say that, well, Britain has had colonies in the past, as of course there's been this faux uproar about, you shouldn't have orders of the British Empire, it should be orders for British excellence instead. Let's rename the OBEs, the MBEs, and so on. So, okay, you don't like the word empire because of colonies. Right, so each country should be its own individual nation and have hard enforced borders. Is that right? No, of course not. Right, so you should have open borders, right? Communication between countries, fantastic. And so you're going to have an ideology that is global, essentially, okay, that is getting people to agree, right? Fantastic. And where did that ideology come from? So, well, it just so happens to have come from Germany, as far as the European Union is concerned. So, right, so Germany is pushing its agenda across the rest of Europe. So, yeah. And that's not colonizing. This seems to fall down. very easily and very quickly, and they really aren't aware of it. But again, of course, in schools, you're supposed to be taught how to think, not what to think, but it seems that any semblance of critical thinking was thrown out quite a while ago. So, we have, get back to the article in question, Headmaster Oliver Blond said, "We wanted to challenge the predominantly Western European narrative and to look beyond the limitations of Britain's island story to discover hidden histories both nationally and internationally." Fair enough. I enjoyed learning about Egypt and and the dinosaurs as well. That's history. I'm sure the rest of you did as well. The question was raised as to whether everyone in the Rhodine community saw themselves in the history they study at school, and to this end, more diverse perspectives had been incorporated within the existing programme in order to challenge preconceptions and stimulate debate. Right. So firstly, I don't give a shit if you feel represented or not. If you're going to a different country, consider learning about that country. And thankfully, Britain has had global influence. There are only about 18 countries in the entire world that Britain hasn't owned at one point. And I know Al Murray has a good stand-up comedy bit about this. Just name any country in the world, Britain's defeated them. But, okay, stimulate debate. Brilliant. So does that mean then we can talk about the origins of Islam and how Muhammad was just a serial rapist, paedophile, murderer, and caravan pillager? We can discuss that then, can we? And of course we can discuss how the slave trade was rife in Africa before the Westerners ever got there. We can discuss that, can we? Fantastic. And we can discuss how the Native Americans, of course, did not establish any worthwhile technology before the Europeans or even Vikings got there and showed them the modern technology to try to bring them up to the modern era. We can discuss that, can we? Of course, we can discuss the origin of Christianity as we have done, and question that and its legitimacy as well. That's a debate, and the existence of God. That's a debate. So, can we debate about Muhammad and whether or not he was a moral person? No, of course not. Can we debate about whether or not colonization of India was worthwhile? So, no, we can't. Okay, can we debate about the effects of communism in China? No, we can't. Right, so this whole stimulate debate, it isn't actually a debate, is it? It's just a one-sided attack on particular values and principles that you don't like. That's not a debate. Maybe you don't understand what a debate is, which is particularly disheartening, because of course this will be framed for new adults coming up in the next few years in order to try and push them a certain way in their voting agenda, in order to then push this message further and further and further along. Which then leads you to wonder, is there any respite in this? Is there perhaps a small area where those of us who are proud of British history and do actually like our country and pledge allegiance to our Queen can move to some small area, and of course that'll be the successful amongst us, that we can then retain that little area and let the rest of the dead wood of this ideology burn off, and once they've given up we can then move in and reclaim it. Is that at all possible? Similarly to, of course, what they're thinking in the United States of America, which is easier because of states. They'd say, okay, fine. We will give you places like New York, Washington, DC, basically the East Coast and the West Coast, and California, all that. We'll keep the middle of the country, especially Texas. We will move there as Republicans, conservatives, and because, of course, we actually understand how the world works, we will continue to thrive and be very successful. And once you guys have burned yourselves out and spent all the money the conservatives have made and created and earned, and you've got nothing left, then maybe we'll move back and you'll actually listen to us. In which case, it comes back to only having the right to vote if you've got skin in the game, which is to say if you own property. if you're a net contributor, you are therefore deciding how your money is being spent. Instead of if you're a net taker, you are deciding how much money you are going to receive. Because that's bribery. But Rodin isn't the only one. Of course, it's Southern England, which is supposed to be the posher area, which is more focused on being the exclusive club. But it doesn't seem to be anymore. Obviously, we've had the whole debacle with the Eton teacher being fired not so long ago. And so now we're also seeing places like Winchester, which was at one point considered to be the capital of England. Fets, from where Johnson studied. Ampleforth and St. Paul's Girls, who are also said to be formulating new approaches to teaching about Britain's colonial past. So as always, let me know what you guys think down below. Other than the obvious, it's really time for homeschooling. Do you think that what people have said, like Dimple, are of course correct in that the Conservatives really need to create more things? So yeah, we've done well and we're good backbones, but on the most part, it's the left who are more creative and therefore tend to be the entrepreneurs. So we need some more right-wing conservative culture, some things that are created, like schools, education systems, tech groups, anything like that, in order to try and balance the playing field and invite people over, instead of just using philosophy, which is vitally important but is a bit dry and isn't very inviting for people to initially get involved in. Is instead to showcase our values in a more entertaining manner. Do you think that? Either way, let me know down below. Always intrigued to hear what you guys have to say. And of course, always thank you for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. All the good stuff does help the channel out a lot. And as always, until next time, have a good one.